I was consulting to HubSpot when it was like 1 or 2 people and eventually joined the company as the 4th employee. The skill necessary to get $1 million deal done, there's so much in there in terms of like, how do I identify and build a good champion? How do I understand the political dynamics? How do I differentiate between an economic buyer, a technical buyer, an end user, a coach, and a champion? How do I like deal with procurement? How do I deal with legal? My $1 million seller that sells to healthcare has all those skills.
Ready to go? Mark, I am so excited for this. I just mentioned I've loved your content for a while now, so this is really exciting. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh yeah, sure, Harry. I'm honored. Thank you for saying that.
Now, I would love to start. How did you first make your way into the world of sales? And when did you know that like sales was really one of your loves?
It was a lot like a lot of the wins in my career. It was completely serendipitous, almost accidental. I was at 23, I discovered that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And even to this day, I kind of consider myself more of an entrepreneur than a sales leader. Even though I was a founder CEO coming out of school, I knew I wanted a functional alignment, and I was torn between marketing and sales. I was like, there's not a lot of MBAs that go into sales, so that's weird. But I really love the art of the deal. And I know generally speaking in tech, salespeople make more than marketers. And I had a young family and like I was the financial, responsible for that. So like that was important and an ingredient. But I felt like the MBA provided you more for marketing. Marketing was going more in a data-driven direction. I was consulting to HubSpot when it was like 1 or 2 people and eventually joined the company as the 4th employee. And that's where it serendipitously kicked in because Halligan was the co-founder and he is a sales guy, and he was like, if we're going to use you 1 day a week as a consultant, I want you to sell. And so that's how I got into sales. Like I was like, all right, cool. Like Dharmesh hired me for 1 day a week. You're now the CEO. If you want me to sell, I'll sell. If you want me to write code, I'll write code. Like it is what it is. So that's how I got into it. And it actually worked out beautifully because I was not only in sales, but I was selling cutting edge marketing software. So I got to learn all about both, which was completely accidental, but awesome.
Where was HubSpot at that time? Did they have any customers? Did they have any funding? I'm just fascinated.
I had sat next to Dharmesh in school at MIT in 2005 in a class. And it was one of those classes where there's like 50 students, everybody shows up with a business idea on like one page. That night you read them all, you vote, and 10 people get picked to be CEOs. And I got picked to do mine, which is in the social networking space. And Dharmesh got picked and his was HubSpot. So that was like the first time I met HubSpot. And then like he and I became friends. We would grab like Chinese food like once a month or so, talk and got to know each other. And then when I was like, hey, by the way, I'm actually going to do mine and raising money, he's like, I'm in. I'll be an angel. I'm like, great. And then at some point through that journey, he was like, I like working with you. Can I pay you as a consultant too to help me with HubSpot? I'm sure you like need money. You have this big loan from MIT and all that stuff. And I'm like, sure. So like when I first got engaged on that level with HubSpot it was just Dharmesh. Brian was in venture capital, but had been working with Dharmesh at MIT on the concept, and Dharmesh was trying to recruit Brian. And so about a couple of months into my consultancy with Dharmesh, he said, hey, I was successfully recruited Brian to be my co-founder and be CEO. And so we sat down and Brian's like, I like Mark. Let's keep Mark on. But Mark, just do sales if we have you 1 day a week. So I did that for about 6 or 7 months. And then he took me to a Red Sox game and was like, so at that point now we've acquired, between Brian and I, we've probably acquired like 40 customers. We're probably at like a couple 100,000 in ARR, and we brought in Mike Volpe as CMO. And Brian took me to a Red Sox game and was like, hey, listen, General Catalyst is coming in for our A round. We're going to raise $5 million or something like that. He's like, why don't you come join full time and be our first salesperson and sales leader?
Can I ask, in terms of the evolution, I think the hardest thing is often for founders to transition from a founder-led sales motion to a sales team-led sales motion. What do you advise founders who are struggling in that transition?
Yeah, it's a really hard one. And it's a key piece to the stage 2 capital thesis is that's exactly the entry point that we like to come in at. Because usually these, like a lot of founders today are product and engineering oriented and don't have a lot of experience in sales. So they gravitate toward, like, every time I ask them, what are you looking for? They always say the same thing. 10 years of experience selling a product like mine to a customer like mine. And there's tremendous research that shows that that mindset correlates with lack of success, like doesn't work out. And it's not that it doesn't help. It's just that there's a whole bunch of other things you need to assess, largely around sales skills, that are not looked at. And because of that, you end up with the bottom 25% performers in your industry. And so that's the biggest pothole. Now, how do you teach a founder? Essentially, what that means is a founder needs to learn how to assess a seller on sales skills. Yeah. And that's like saying to a salesperson, challenging them to assess an engineer on how well they write Java. It's hard to do. Like, you almost have to go to school for 5 years. So it's kind of the same thing. So it's difficult. I can't just like say a statement and like you learn it in a minute. But what I can say is go find an advisor, Harry. Go find an advisor. Because like advisors are cheap. They're usually a little bit of equity. Go find someone that's hired a bunch of salespeople. Particularly that in this case, it could be okay that it's in your domain. You know?
Okay, a couple of questions. One, does the founder have to create the first sales playbook, or can they actually bring in a sales leader from day one on revenue?
It depends on the aspect of the playbook, Harry. So in terms of like a Sandler level or winning by design, like force management methodology, that's going to take a professional leader to like bring in and navigate. Like even things like, how do you manage the first meeting and do discovery well? No, I don't see a lot of product founders coming up with that. But one of the underlying pieces of the sales playbook is a buyer journey. So like, what are the different ways that buyers describe the problem you solve or the opportunity that you create? And how do they look to solve that? And how do they look to make that decision? That's something that a founder should be working on from day one, just to start crystallizing that. Another piece is the ideal customer profile. You know, so what are the attributes of like what a home run fit is for us versus not? The other attribute is like just the general value proposition that we're pitching. Like these are typically areas where founders can make a lot of progress on their own. They might get it to like 70% of the way there. And then a professional seller is going to come in and take it the final mile and add the details like cold calling, getting the appointment, doing discovery calls, tailoring the pitch, handling objections, dealing with negotiations, all that kind of stuff.
I'm loving this. So I'm a founder in your portfolio and I don't know what I'm doing here. So you're going to help me. For my first sales hire then, I've got us to 700K in ARR.
Yep.
Do I have someone who's sold to customers like mine before, or do I have someone who's sold deal sizes like mine before? If you could have one deal size or category that they've experienced before, which would you rather?
I have strong conviction that deal size has a higher weight in correlation to success. Let's just say we sell $1 million deals to banks. And I have two candidates. One candidate sells $10,000 deals to banks, and one candidate sells $1 million deals to hospitals. The skill necessary to get $1 million deal done, it's just like there's so much in there in terms of like, how do I identify and build a good champion? How do I understand the political dynamics? How do I differentiate between an economic buyer, a technical buyer, an end user, a coach, and a champion? How do I like understand medic as a sales process? How do I like deal with procurement? How do I deal with legal? My $1 million seller that sells to healthcare has all those skills. My person that sells to banks, but they sell $10,000 deals has none of those skills. So I'm much better. I'll be much easier for me to teach the $1 million seller about banks than it is for me to teach a $10,000 transactional seller how to do all that other stuff.
Okay, I'm in this process hiring our sales rep or our first sales edition. What are the must-ask questions, Mark, that I should ask?
I love getting into a role play, you know, and so like that's the most important part is this part where it's like, okay, Harry, you know, let's say we're hiring for HubSpot. It's like, let's just pretend you're a small business owner and you downloaded the HubSpot inbound marketing ebook yesterday and you got the lead. Let's just do the first call. And so we'll do the call, and I'm looking at things like really good open-ended questions, follow-on questions to do discovery and qualify need and quantify need. And I'm hoping that there's no show up and throw up and they give me like a 5-minute commercial on HubSpot that I could have just read online. Otherwise, probably not going to hire them. And then I'll stop the interview a couple minutes in, and then I'm going to assess coachability. Because in most startup contexts, no one's going to come out of the gate hitting their productivity in month one. Like they have to learn the product, the methodology, the customer. So I'm assessing their ability to be coached. And so I'll have you self-assess. And if you're like that, I was awesome, I have no feedback for myself, then that's a red flag. Most people are pretty introspective and can analyze their pros and cons. Every interview, I give a piece of positive feedback and a piece of need for improvement. So I give a positive, I give a need for improvement. I watch how they take the coaching. And then usually I have them redo the role play. And then if we're going to do another meeting, I'll say, we're going to do it again. So I'll let you think about it for 2 days and then come back. And that's a big part of my assessment.
How fast do you know when you've made a mishire?
It takes a while. I haven't had a lot of those situations where, because I think we've been pretty rigorous on hiring, that like we would have weeded that out. And I have a lot of situations where I had a rep that was in there for 3 or 4 months and we weren't sure and they weren't hitting it, but we gave it a shot, and 7 months in, they were toward the top and they stayed there. So that was perplexing to me, Harry, because like I want a lot of early knowledge and lead indicators. So, but I've seen that happen quite a bit. It just took them a little while to get there. And the only thing I can say early on kind of comes back to that coachability again. If I have a manager come to me and say, oh yeah, Pete's not working out. And I'll say, how do you know? Like, well, look at their numbers. And I'm like, okay, well, what are you coaching Pete on? And like, well, we're trying to get him to do a little better job on sense of urgency development. And I'll say, okay, how are you coaching him? So now I can assess if the manager's got a good diagnosis and good coaching model. And then I'm like, okay, when you're coaching them, are they staying when you move them up a little bit? Are they staying there, or are they there for a week and then they go down? If they're going up for a week and go down, yeah, we probably need to make a cut. But if they're staying there, this is taking a little while, let's hang in there. I think we're going to get there. That's the best I can see to get an early signal as to whether this person's going to make it.
In terms of the hiring process, when it comes to titles, what are some of the biggest lessons in terms of the title discussion and what it might reveal about someone joining a company?
It's probably a red flag if they're over obsessed with it. A little bit of ego stroking, and that's not going to be great for culture, especially early on when it has to be like, let's roll up our sleeves and do whatever it takes.
Should young companies be worried about giving away VP of sales or head of sales too early because it makes it difficult to layer, or not?
I don't think it does. To your point, I think it's a red flag for the candidate. But if I have a star and I have to give them a VP of sales title instead of director, or a CRO title instead of VP to get them to do the job I see for them for the next 18 months and then assess, I don't see it be an issue. Like, it's like, okay, I hire someone, they kill it for 18 months, and then after that, we decide we've got to up-level them. In one case, their title is director of sales. In another case, their title is VP of sales. I don't think that's harder.
What about money and incentive packages? Any big lessons there on what? Advise me. I've never hired a sales team before, never hired a rep before. How should I do it? How should I structure it? What do you advise me?
What most people do, which is I think a big mistake, is they hire a sales person or leader and sort of delegate it to them because they sort of like are the functional expert on it. And then that person uses the sales comp model from their last company. That's really broken. That's not good. A lot of founders don't realize is you can get pretty creative here, especially in the early stages. And the best way to devise a comp plan is to think about what you need the business to do in the next 6 to 12 months strategically. Don't even think about sales, just strategically, holistically. Are any of those reinforceable with salesperson behavior or action? And if so, that's going to start deciding your comp plan. So I'll give you some really common examples. First off, which is like semi-related to that point, I don't like commission plan salespeople in the journey to product market fit. Like, I just want pure equity people. Like, if we're trying to find product market fit, if we have 3 design partner customers and we need to get to like 20 to understand product market fit, I'm going to bring on a salesperson to help us do that. And that person's making, say, 150, like 75 base, 75 commission. I don't want to put them on a comp plan. I want to like, I'm going to just say like, listen, I'm going to pay you like 125 flat out, no matter what, with some equity. That's the right person. Because like, we're sitting around and we're pivoting. We've got it wrong. We have to go back to the drawing board, and it's going to take us 3 weeks to build this thing. All the engineers are making their salary, paying their mortgage, and the sales rep is like desperate and sweating. I don't need that. And furthermore, like, that's not the rep I'm trying to attract right now. I'm trying to attract a rep that like enjoys that design journey, is sitting there, shoulder to shoulder with the engineers and not sweating making the mortgage payment or thinking short term. But then like once we get into, okay, now we have product market fit, then this is a classic example where it's like, now we need to get like go to market fit, but we have to make sure that as we scale, we keep customer value and success top of mind. And so I want to make sure that my reps are not just selling customers and revenue. They're selling healthy customers that are in my ICP. They're going to see a lot of value from our product. Most comp plans don't motivate that, don't incentivize that. But here's an example of what we talk about, like think about your strategy and align it with a comp plan. It's like, okay, Harry, when you sell a deal, you're going to make, 5% on that deal. I'm going to give you half of the commission when the customer pays and half the commission when they hit their leading indicator of retention, which usually happens in the first 30 days. So that could be as simple as like they set up the product and process their first transaction. Okay. So as long as that leading indicator of retention is something meaningful, that again can happen in the first 30 days of the customer's life. But if it happens, they're probably going to be with us for a long time. And if it doesn't happen, they're probably going to churn. And you'd be shocked how much like the sales process in terms of what's discussed, how the product is presented, what types of customers are pursued drives that. And that's like a not commonly used compensation plan, but should be at that stage and is aligned with the strategic objective of the company.
Are there any big fuck ups that you see portfolio companies make on comp plans for sales teams that you're like, Harry, don't make this mistake?
Yeah, so many. I mean, that's like just one of them is like, so like one of the ones that we've talked about recently, I just launched a podcast last week on this, how if you're pursuing like PLG or land and expand, the sales compensation plan can really F that up, right? Because most sales compensation plans put most of the payment, the commission, on the first ACV from the customer and have very little, if any, on expansion. And that's the opposite of what it puts the salesperson at odds with how you want customers to buy your product. Because when you're in PLG or land and expand, the buyer wants to start small to test it out and then expand it, whether that's with other functions or departments or whatever. And you, as a company, a startup, your strategy is to do the same thing. Make it easy for customers to just like give it a shot and expand it. But if your reps are paid in that way, they want the opposite. They want you to buy everything up front and you're likely to contract or churn. So that's a huge fuck up that we see a lot.
What's the right way to solve that then? Because I'm just taking it, say it's like a 10K PLG product, and like the 10K is kind of the entry price, but we want them to scale to 100K. As a company, you don't want to pay 100K upfront, get hit with cash flow problems in that way.
I would do something like this, Harry. You're a salesperson. Your job is bringing customers. I'm going to pay you, 3% rate on the first ACV from a customer and 5% on any expansion revenue. So now it's like, oh, sweet. Okay, I get it. So I will make the most money if I sell customers on a very small ACV to start and expand them later. Yes, that's what you do. Wait, and then the salesperson's like, wait. Am I a CSM now? No, you just go hunt. You go hunt, you sign up customers, and we have a CSM team that onboards them, and they expand them. They have their own different comp plan. They have their incentives too. That's just how yours works. If you sign up good, healthy customers with good expectations, you make a lot of money. If you sign up a bunch of crappy customers that don't stick around and don't expand, you're not going to make a lot of money.
The thing that worries me, honestly, and the biggest problem I see even in our portfolio companies today is like sales-led growth with PLG pricing that doesn't expand. And what I mean by that is traditional large sales teams selling 3K ACVs, and they say, but if we prove it and if we do this and this and this, then it'll expand to 30K. And truth be told, it rarely does. And so we have this kind of enterprise sales cost base for a PLG pricing that doesn't often expand. At what price point does it make sense to have a sales team?
Yeah, like even in HubSpot, we started at like $3,000 a year. I would say that's on the lower end. Okay. Now that required a lot of inbound leads, right? So like there's a big missing part to that is like the ACV is only one portion to answer like whether or not our go-to-market motion is working, whether we have a salesperson or PLG, or we're using marketing and inbound, or we're doing cold calling, whatever. The absolute right answer comes down to unit economics. And there's a couple different ways to measure unit economics. Let's just say payback period, which is the CAC divided by the ACV. Is, you probably should take ACV times gross margin, but like, let's just say, so it's like, let's keep it simple. Someone pays us $10,000 a year, then the CAC needs to be $10,000 for us to have a payback period of a year, right? So if someone pays us $10,000 a year and it costs us $10,000 to acquire them, we get paid back in 12 months, right? Anything above that, you start to question whether unit economics work. Anything below that, it's really good. So the problem is ACV is only one part of that formula, Harry. So the CAC is the other piece. And the CAC for outbound sales teams is all over the place because it depends on like how many calls do you have to make to get an appointment? How many of those appointments turn into a demo? How many of those demos close, right? So there's a lot of different variations in there, right? Like are you calling CMIOs of hospital systems, or are you calling like landscapers of small businesses that pick up the phone a lot, right? So there's so many variations. So it really comes down to like the absolute academic and practical answer is it have to have good unit economics. The CAC and the ACV have to match up, but it's not always like at 3,000 ACV you can have a sales team and at 2,000 you can't.
When you look at payback periods as an investor today, what are you like bad, good, great?
At the IPO, less than 12 months is excellent. 12 to 15 is good. 15 to 20 gets concerning. Above 20, it's going to be a real problem. 20 months, okay? At the Series A, less than 12 is it's almost like you're probably being too efficient. Like we could probably like try to grow faster. 12 to 15 is really good. 15 to 20 is fine. It's kind of like, that's fine for now. We'll have to work on it later. Above 20, it gets concerning. Yeah. So you kind of have like some semblance, but there's a little more flexibility at the Series A because we know that there's a lot of improvement that's just going to come with scale potentially. And then there's a lot of opportunities and low-hanging fruit for us to get to that just isn't a priority right now.
So I see a lot of 2 to 3 month paybacks, which at Series A,
Amazing.
which to your point would be that, yeah, there's always a game with numbers though, Mark, isn't there? What's included in your CAC? And I've had some where it's like, well, it's just my marketing spend, or it's just my outbound sales team. And it's like, well, that doesn't count.
Yeah.
It's not quite that. What should be included in a CAC for a founder to truly understand their actual payback?
Yeah. So at scale, it's going to be like on your income statement, the entire sales and marketing line is going to be the CAC. And you divide that by the number of customers that are acquired in that period, let's say in a quarter that you're evaluating. Now that gets challenging at the Series A because if the founders are selling, well, then you have to attribute a part of their salary hypothetically. And if like you're throwing just general networking events for the company, and that's leading to leads. So there's always these squishy costs. But like just to keep it simple, everything you're spending on marketing and salespeople and sales leadership and sales ops and all that kind of stuff needs to go in there.
Okay. The one thing that we didn't discuss, though, actually, is the LTV. And it does matter, because if we look at, like, I don't know, banking customers, for example, or phone customers, I'm taking them because they are generally the longest serving customers. They last for 7 to 10 years. And so you can actually have a higher CAC if your LTVs are much longer. How do you think about that when analyzing early stage companies where we have, in the UK, we would say, fuck all data?
Yeah. So, there's multiple ways to measure unit economics. There's payback, and then there's LTV to CAC. For whatever reason, the industry talks about an LTV to CAC greater than 3. It's a little bit of a farce, but it's not like a terrible measure. It's good to know what your LTV to CAC is. And so that's where you could find that, Harry. And that's going to be tricky because theoretically, the lifetime value should be your ACV divided by your churn rate. And like, you don't know your churn rate really for 5 years or more. So you have to make some pretty heavy assumptions there.
Do you not think you know your churn rate? So if we take, like, HubSpot, why did so many investors pass on HubSpot? Oh, you serve SMBs, don't they go out of business at such a high rate?
Right.
The churn rate's going to be horrible.
Yep.
I think I think there's some discrepancy, and not blaming anyone, but I think the early HubSpot churn rate, at some points it's been said to be like 3 to 4% and some 8%. Point just being, SMBs go out of business.
A month,
by
the way. Yeah, it was high. 8 was the highest it hit in February of 2008. Throughout 2008, it was mostly between 3 and 4, which is terrible. I mean, even at 3 or 4, that's 40 to 50% a year churn. It's really bad.
You're an investor today. Do you invest in a company that serves SMBs with 3 to 4% churn rates?
We do invest in companies that serve SMBs. That's become like a really great starting point, and you can build a healthy business there. But more importantly, use that success to move upstream to the mid-market when your product and brand and your sophistication justifies it, and then eventually to the enterprise. Potentially, these are very common plays. But with 3 to 4%, nah, not a lot. I mean, you have to have a lot of other things going right, because actually you just don't have a business. Now, if you do want to make your business work in SMB, you just need a really healthy expansion motion, because like just macroeconomics, because of like small business bankruptcy and budget sensitivities, if you're doing really well, you probably have an 80%, 85% logo retention in SMB. So you need to have at least a greater than 15% revenue expansion to get your business to be solid, to get your revenue retention to be above 100%, which is like, it's doable. And that's why PLG is beautiful, because like in PLG, most starting ACVs is 0. It's all expansion. Right. And so only the people that have already seen value in your product start with revenue, and that usually sticks very nicely and then continues to expand. So SMB is very doable. It's just like, you probably have to start them on low ACVs, and you have to have a really strong expansion mechanism.
Can I ask, I had Dave Kellogg on the show there, and he said that he loves GRR, gross revenue retention, and is much more telling than net revenue retention. How do you think about net revenue retention versus gross revenue retention for founders listening going, which one?
I think they're both needed. I probably put more weight in net revenue retention, because at the end of the day, if you have 120% net revenue retention, then you're going to grow 20% a year without acquiring any customers. That's really powerful. Okay. Whether that means you have 90%, customer retention with 30% expansion, and that's how you get to the 120, or you have 50% customer retention with 70% revenue expansion, and that's how you get to 120. Either way, you're going to grow by 20% a year if you keep that up. Now, that's why I think that's the most important. Okay. Now, if the problem with the latter of having 50% customer retention with 70% expansion, yeah, the customers that stick with you are seeing a lot of value and paying more. But that means half the world out there are being like, yeah, I tried Harry's product and it didn't work for me. That's not good. That's why I want to look at customer retention, but like I kind of think net revenue retention is more important. This is my view.
Is that not good? Like, I think if you have a tied ICP and you're very clear in terms of who your customer is, especially in a PLG world, there'll be people who pick it up and try it, and it's not for them. And they're like, yeah, it was never meant for you.
For sure. I mean, like that's fine, but like I just worry that like some customers don't, know that. Like I know this company is selling yoga software and they sell it specifically for like, more of like multi-location yoga studios, but yoga studio owners talk to each other, and like I think when they're at like a retreat together, and they're like, oh yeah, I tried that and it didn't work for me. I don't think they're like thinking, oh, were they an ICP or not? You know what I mean? I just think like there's a reputation. So
I'm not that ICP.
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
Right. Well, you're different than me. Like, so.
When you're investing today, a net revenue retention of 120 is good for founders. Like, how do you think about good and great?
At some point, you need to get above 100%, because if you're not above 100% net revenue retention, that just means you're like, in order to grow, you have to outsell that gap with new customers. Okay. So like if you're at like 10 million in revenue, that's not that hard. If you're at 10 million in revenue and you have 90% revenue retention, that means that you start the year, your customers are paying you 10 million, and those customers will be paying you 9 million at the end of the year. And so you just need to sell $1 million in new software to break even, to maintain flat. And you need to sell 5 million of software to grow by 40%. That's not that hard. But once you get to $1 billion in revenue and you have a 90% net revenue retention, that means that at the end of the year, you're going to have 900 million. So you have to sell $100 million of new contracts to new customers just to remain flat, and 200 million of new software to new customers to grow by 10%. That is hard. Versus if you're at $1 billion and you have 110% net revenue retention, you can do nothing in new sales and you're going to grow by 10%. So at some point, it's just like you can't outsell our net revenue retention less than 100%.
One of the favorite things I have about HubSpot is the way that you just like broke the SaaS law of SMBs in terms of it being a great business to serve and not needing to scale necessarily into enterprise. But you invest today in amazing SaaS founders, and I'm sure you see them say, we're thinking about scaling into enterprise. How do you advise founders that you work with, or advise me, in terms of when is the right time, or if at all, to scale into enterprise?
Both answers could be correct. I will say that it is extremely rare that you want to go into enterprise south of a couple million in revenue. Extremely rare. You almost have to like obviously like a company like SpaceX, there's no SMB play. You know what I mean? Like you're selling... Your proposition is to put satellites in space, like that. You're selling to major governments, whatever. So that's fine. That's a great business, but you got to raise like hundreds of millions of revenue before you even have a customer. It's just a different type of business, different type of investor. That's not what stage 2 does. Is not what I do. So it's a little bit of a trap for most entrepreneurs to want to go to the enterprise too early. A lot of my students do this, like, oh, if I can just get that huge logo, everybody else will follow. Well, 2 problems with that. Number one, you really underestimate what it's like to get that logo. It's going to take a long time, maybe a year and a half. And whoever's your champion, you might quit their job in that time. And by the time you get to the finish line, you're going to have to do SOX compliance and show all the stuff, and you don't have it. So it's like, it's just going to kill you from a capital standpoint. And so your better bet is to figure out what your product is, what your offering is, figure out your total addressable market, and carve out the lowest part possible. Now, it's not always like a couple people. Like we have an AI product company for support teams. It doesn't work if you only have 2 support reps. It just does not make sense. You have to have at least 20. But that's fine. Like we can go sell companies with 500 employees and 20 support reps. That's fine. That's not trying to close a huge bank. So you just have to carve out the smallest possible. And then I've asked a lot of people, from Chris Degnan, one of our LPs, or the founding CEO of Snowflake, to like, Kevin Egan, who I did a podcast, who took like Salesforce and Dropbox and Atlassian and Slack upstream. And the answer on when is always the same from them. It's like when you get pulled. That's what they say. Because like you're making hay in the SMB, you're going 1 million, 3 million, 7 million. And like big businesses start hearing about you. In fact, you're probably turning away big businesses before you're starting to sell them. And then at some point you just get pulled up. Yeah.
That's why I did take the bold stance of disagreeing with Dagnan and Egan.
Great.
That's why it's why I disagree with them though, because you might actually get pulled at 1 million in ARR. And actually very often I find enterprises can distort strategy and product roadmap before they are ready for it.
Yeah.
And people do not understand what it truly means to be an enterprise company. As you said, SOC 2, all compliance is different. So no, not when they pull
I agree. You were actually in agreement, Harry. I probably didn't say it right. And they would say like, you're not going to go unless you're pulled, but if you're being pulled, it doesn't mean you should go. Okay. So that, I think you're on the same page with them, Harry. And like classic example, I mean, I think we're at 2-3 million in revenue at HubSpot, and one rep brought Facebook to the table as a customer. It was like a $3 million contract. It would have doubled our revenue. And he said no. We were being pulled, said no. Because everything's going to go bad at that point. Like they're going to start controlling your product roadmap. We're not built for that. It's not going to go well. Things are going to get around. It's going to distract the company. Like it's just, and the other thing that happens too, Harry, is like if one of them, I had another company recently that did this where like a friend of the CEO at a big company came in and bought. And it was like a huge contract. Up until then, they'd been selling $15,000 ACVs. And this one was like 200,000. And all the salespeople were like, whoa, look at that. I made my annual goal in one sale. And everybody will start doing that. And now all of a sudden you have no sales because you don't know how to sell those deals. That was like a lucky inbound. It's a real big trap.
Yeah. In terms of like, you mentioned that like the logo that drives social validity, to what extent do large logos drive social validity and subsequent sales? Does having Dropbox, Tesla, does that really work, or is it like
not as much as people think? Like they're always going to say, just case studies in general. You throw a case study, well, that's a bank and I'm in healthcare. Okay, well, here's one from healthcare. Well, that's in oncology and I'm a dermatologist. Okay, here's one in oncology. Well, that's in this type of oncology and I'm more this type. You know what I mean? It's like, or they're on the West Coast and we're on the East. Like they're never satisfied, so it's like, it helps a little, but not as much as people think.
And do you think that when you're advising founders, it's great to get like just sheer volume, number of customers through the door, volume,
Definitely,
or quality of those logos?
Well, okay,
and those
good question. Like, you have to be specific about your ICP and like pushing folks out. Now, very early, it's a hypothesis. So let's say like if you take the whole world and ultimately your ICP is going to be, say, like 5% of that. Well, I might be okay us selling to like 10 to 12% and drawing a little bigger circle because we just don't know. But like there's some folks, I like to do like a green, yellow, red. I have different attributes like, how many employees, where are they located in the world, what sectors are they in, these types of things, right? And the green is like, we have strong conviction that those are good fits, right? Between 50 and 500 employees based in the US in tech. That's green. And we're going to go after those all day. So when our SDRs are cold calling, they're only cold calling those people. Then there's reds where we have strong conviction. We will not sell. In fact, you cannot sell them. Okay. So that might be outside of English speaking territories. That might be healthcare, nonprofit, government. And it might be like greater than 10,000 employees. Those are red. You are not allowed to sell them. Yellow is you can sell them if they're inbound. So we're not going to cold call them. But if they come inbound, we don't have enough conviction to know that they're not a fit. We also don't have enough conviction to like go outbound. So that's how I kind of try to think about it in that green, yellow, red mindset, at least to start. And then over time, you can start to evaluate customer success, performances, et cetera, to get more conviction on it.
What was your inbound to outbound ratio at HubSpot?
Ridiculously high. Like I don't know if any company's ever had it. Like it's rare to see it that high. It was, I think 100% of our customers came inbound for the first 2 or 3 years.
How did that change over time?
I would say, I'm guessing here, I would say year 4, we also built a vibrant channel partner program, a very fragmented channel partner program through like very small channels, so channel partners. So I would say by year 5, we were probably like 50% inbound, 30% channel, 20% outbound. And then like around the IPO, it becomes very blurry because at that point, you tend to just like go to territories, and the brand becomes so strong that like it's really not clear what an inbound versus an out. Like someone does a cold call and they're like, oh yeah, I know you just cold called me, but I'm already a HubSpot customer. And you're like, what do you mean I'm a HubSpot customer? Like, oh, I've been using your marketing grader, your free marketing grader product for 2 years. Like, oh yeah, like you're not really a customer. Or like, oh, I heard about you guys. I saw you at an event. So it's like when you hit brand scale, the lines start to get blurred.
So I'm so enjoying this. You mentioned channel partners. I think so many founders go, well, we're going to get a channel partnership with SAP or Workday, and then they're just going to sell for us.
Oh my gosh, so many. Huge pothole.
Okay, so tell me, what are the biggest mistakes startups make with channel partnerships?
Yeah, exactly what you said, Harry, which is just like a complete underestimate of what it takes to actually mobilize that partner. And I get why they're doing it. It's like we're going back to our product founder and they're like, yeah, we have like 10 design partners and 10 design customers. And now we have to go acquire a bunch of customers. And I have 2 options. Option A is hire a big, expensive, scary sales team that's going to destroy my culture. And I don't know how to hire salespeople. Or just go partner with Workday, who already has 5,000 salespeople, and I'll just give them 20% of my profit. Why wouldn't they ever want to do that? It makes perfect sense. And it's just like, first off, do you even know how to get into Workday's program? Like you need to like really have good alignment with as high up as possible to do that. Second off, do you even know how to get the mind share, the rep? Imagine being a Workday salesperson. You worked for hours to get 30 minutes with a customer. What are you pulling out of your bag to show them? Some startup's little product that I get a 5% spiff on? No. You know what I mean? So to really mobilize, you have to understand what the strategy at the C level is and make a case that your product aligns with that, and then convince them to spiff the crap out of their reps so they're motivated to pull it out of their bag. Hard.
How do I convince them to spiff? I'm so sorry. What is spiff in the UK?
It's like a commission bonus. Okay, so let me give you an example. This happened.
Do you know what? In the UK, it's marijuana.
Okay. No, I'm not incentivizing with drugs. No. So I'm sorry. It's like a little like one-off bonus. Okay. So I'll give you an example. Salesforce.com was an early investor in our Series D, believe it or not, and actually became a big channel partner for us over time, about 10% of our customers before we became competitive. And so here's an example of what happened. We had contacts really high up. George Hugh, I think it was, who was COO. And he eventually got us Benioff's ear. And we heard at the time, Salesforce wasn't in marketing yet, in the Marketing Cloud. We also heard that the number one sales objection and reason for close lost was, hey, cool, you organize my leads for me and my deals, but my biggest issue is getting more leads. And the Salesforce.com sales reps didn't know how to talk about demand generation. Benioff knew it. And he's like, okay, we need to find partners that can help us with demand gen and help us train our reps how to talk about demand gen. And George's like, I got this new company, HubSpot, that's really cool. So he started to learn about us, and Benioff's like, whoa, this is exactly what we need. So he's like, Benioff looks at all the different things that are in their app exchange, DocuSign, all this stuff, right? And Benioff is like, we're going to choose 10 out of the 3,000 that our reps get quota relief on. It counts toward their quota. And HubSpot is one of them. And I'm going to talk about that on our sales kickoff. So Benioff gets up and says, hey, keep selling all of our we have really cool channel partners. There are 3,000. It's a huge app exchange. And there's 10 of them that you get quota relief. And all the reps are like, whoa, that's amazing. Now, even when that happened, it only like 1% of our revenue came in. So I had to take one of our best salespeople, Adam Mavrikos, and assign him to that partnership. Benioff and George Hugh were so into it They gave Adam his own office in Salesforce Tower, his own desk in Salesforce Tower in San Francisco and in the Toronto office. And he had his own login to the Salesforce.com CRM for the Salesforce team. And he was on Chatter all day, like, yeah, good job. You got quarter leave. And he'd fly around to all the satellite offices. And after a year, they were contributing 10% of our revenue. So hopefully that's a good example of what it takes to mobilize a big partnership. It's hard.